Old age comes as an inevitable stage in the journey of life, and with it arise questions that few want to confront. Where is it better to live? Should a person remain independent, live with their children, or accept the reality of a nursing home? These questions do not have simple answers, as they touch on much more than just physical space. These are decisions concerning dignity, loneliness, freedom, and expectations. Expectations that, as a rule, are not fulfilled. Schopenhauer said that illusion is the source of all human suffering. Many enter old age believing it will be a period of care and recognition for the years devoted to family, but reality can be different. The truth is that interaction with children does not always bring the expected comfort. Independence can be lonelier than it seems, and nursing homes, despite their stigma, may offer a better quality of life than a home without attention. In light of this, what is the best choice? How to live in old age without becoming a burden, but also without feeling forgotten? The idea of spending old age near children is, for many, a dream of comfort and security. After many years devoted to family, it is expected that this stage of life will be marked by reciprocity, care, and constant presence. But reality can be entirely different. Schopenhauer said that family ties are formed out of necessity, not eternal gratitude. As children grow up, they build their own routines, take on responsibilities, create their own families, and face everyday problems. Although love remains, the time available for parents becomes scarce. Living with children does not necessarily mean being in their company. In many cases, such coexistence brings more disappointments than joys. The expectation of constant attention can be shattered by the fast pace of modern life, and what seemed like an opportunity to grow closer turns into a sense of alienation. When an elderly person moves into their children's home, they begin to share a space that already has an established dynamic. Small differences in lifestyle become apparent. Routines, habits, preferences, and even minor quirks can conflict. While children have their work obligations and grandchildren are immersed in the digital world, elderly people feel they occupy an undefined space between nostalgia for the past and a lack of belonging in the present. It is not uncommon for an elderly person, even in the same house, to feel isolated. Conversations are interrupted, family dinners become rushed moments, and gestures of care give way to the hustle of daily life. Schopenhauer warned that expecting much from others is a sure path to disappointment. This disappointment arises from the gap between expectation and reality, a chasm that can become more evident in interactions between elderly parents and adult children. One elderly woman, facing health problems, decided to accept her daughter's invitation to live with her. At first, the idea seemed ideal: closeness, support, and the opportunity to strengthen family bonds. In the early days, everything seemed promising. There was warmth and confidence that she wouldn't have to face old age alone. However, over time, the household routine revealed an unpleasant truth. The daughter left early and returned late from work, always exhausted. The son-in-law, often polite, avoided long conversations, preferring the silence of the television or mobile phone. The grandchildren, absorbed in the virtual world, barely noticed her presence. Even surrounded by people, the elderly woman found herself immersed in unexpected loneliness. Throughout the day, she spent hours in silence, with no one to talk to. Interactions were brief and superficial, limited to questions about her health or requests for help with minor household chores. One day, trying to start a conversation, she heard from her daughter, "Mom, I can't right now. I'm very busy." That phrase, spoken without intent to offend, sounded like a reminder that reality differed from what she had imagined. Then she realized that living with family does not mean being part of their lives. The house wasn't hers, the schedule wasn't hers, and her presence, no matter how unobtrusive, always seemed merely an addition to someone else's daily life. Schopenhauer's lesson is clear. One should not seek in family the source of constant happiness. The love of children does not disappear, but their priorities change. Relying solely on this coexistence for companionship and attention can be a painful illusion. Independence, even partial, may be a wiser choice. Having one's own space, even if near family, allows for maintaining autonomy without creating unrealistic expectations. After all, being close does not necessarily mean being together, and little can be lonelier than feeling like a stranger in one's own home. Old age brings a complex dilemma. On one hand, there is the desire to preserve autonomy, to continue making one's own decisions and living without relying on others. On the other hand, there is the fear of loneliness, isolation, and a lack of support when it is most needed. Schopenhauer warned that the less we depend on others, the less we are disappointed by their limitations. Dependence inevitably brings expectations, and with them, the risk of disappointment. However, a completely solitary life can cause anxiety, especially when health begins to demand more care. In light of this, there is an intermediate solution that can balance these extremes, living alone but near family. This arrangement allows an elderly person to maintain their individuality and routine while having accessible support when needed. It's not just about where we live, but how we build this new stage of life, finding a path that allows us to preserve dignity without giving up emotional comfort. Living with children may mean giving up personal life and adapting to others' routines. Living in a nursing home may be seen as the final step toward dependence. Meanwhile, living alone requires planning and, above all, a mindset that values one's own company. The important question is not only whether independence is possible, but whether it can be comfortable. Many elderly people fear isolation, but forget that true loneliness lies not in the absence of people, but in the absence of meaning. Schopenhauer viewed solitude as a refuge for those who understand the nature of human relationships. He argued that it is often better to be alone than surrounded by superficial and exhausting interactions. After all, how many people live surrounded by relatives, yet still feel lonely? For independence to work, an elderly person needs to reconnect with themselves, create a routine that includes enjoyable habits, establish small social commitments, and accept that life at any age needs its own meaning. One elderly man, after his wife's death, faced a difficult decision about where to spend the remaining years of his life. His son offered him a room in his house, but he hesitated. He didn't want to be a burden, and above all, didn't want to feel that his life depended on the goodwill of others. So, he found a solution. He rented a small apartment a few blocks from his son's house. This way, he could continue his routine without interfering in the family's life, but with the peace of mind that help was nearby if something happened. At first, the decision brought doubt. The nights seemed longer, and the absence of someone to share meals with weighed on him. But over time, he noticed something unexpected. Solitude was not a punishment, but an opportunity. Now he woke up when he wanted, cooked at his own pace, and devoted more time to reading and walking. He could visit his son and grandchildren when he wanted, without feeling like he was intruding on a space that wasn't his. Schopenhauer argued that life becomes easier when we stop fighting what we cannot change. With this choice, the elderly man realized that old age didn't have to be a burden or regret. It was simply another phase, and he was ready to live it with dignity. The main lesson that the pursuit of independence teaches is that being alone does not always mean being lonely. Old age can be a period of reflection and freedom if one learns to appreciate it without unrealistic expectations. Having one's own space, not depending directly on children, allows for preserving a sense of identity and autonomy. Schopenhauer said that the greatest happiness comes from being sufficient unto oneself. Independence, when possible, is not isolation but a gift. It allows an elderly person to live by their own rules, without feeling the need to conform to others' demands. More than a practical question, this choice is a stance toward life. To accept that freedom, at any age, remains one of the most valuable assets one can have. When it comes to nursing homes, the first thing that comes to mind for many elderly people is abandonment. The idea of being left aside, removed from family, without control over one's life, causes fear and resistance. After all, for centuries, family culture emphasized that parents should care for children until the end of their lives. But does this perspective make sense? Is every nursing home synonymous with oblivion, or in some cases, can it represent a new opportunity to live well? Schopenhauer said, "What matters is not the place where we live, but the quality of life we lead in it." This reflection makes sense when we observe that many elderly people spend their final years isolated in their own homes, without company, without interaction, and often without proper care. The truth is that being in one's own home does not always mean being okay, just as not every nursing home means loneliness. What truly defines an elderly person's experience in this environment is not the name of the place, but how they are treated and what opportunities are provided to them. Resistance to nursing homes largely stems from a romanticized ideal of old age. Many believe this stage of life should be spent among family, surrounded by children and grandchildren, but they forget that such coexistence is not always possible or beneficial. The problem lies not only in the lack of time from relatives, but also in the fact that modern life imposes different dynamics. Children work, grandchildren have their own routines, and an elderly person often spends more time alone than they would like. Additionally, there is the issue of health. Caring for an elderly person requires dedication and knowledge, which many relatives, no matter how well-intentioned, cannot provide. Over time, these relationships can become exhausting for both parties, turning what should be loving care into a quiet burden. In a good nursing home, a person can find companionship, safety, and activities that give meaning. Instead of feeling like a burden to family, they begin to live in an environment that promotes their quality of life. One elderly man always rejected the idea of going to a nursing home. For him, it was the final stage before being forgotten, a sign that he was no longer important to anyone. For years, he lived alone in his house. His children visited on weekends, but most of the time, they were busy with their own lives. During the week, his routine was monotonous. He woke up, made coffee, watched television, and waited for the phone to ring, which didn't always happen. Over time, his health began to deteriorate. Small memory lapses, difficulties with simple tasks, and constant fatigue led his children to insist that he try living in a nursing home. Reluctantly, but with no alternatives, he agreed. Upon arrival, his first impression was negative. He felt out of place, as if he had truly ended up in a space awaiting the end of life. However, over the days, something surprising happened. He discovered he was no longer alone. There were other people his age with similar stories, ready to talk and share experiences. He began participating in activities, rediscovering the pleasure of board games, walks in the fresh air, and even small trips organized by the facility. Moreover, he met an old childhood friend who, by coincidence, was also there. Their conversations became an important part of his routine, and for the first time in a long while, he felt part of something. Schopenhauer warned, "Suffering arises from resisting change. Accepting reality can be liberating." This elderly man realized that the problem was not the place, but how he perceived the situation. The main lesson of this story is that the fear of change can be far worse than the change itself. Of course, not all nursing homes are the same. Some indeed do not offer the care and attention an elderly person deserves, making it necessary to choose a place with good conditions and a welcoming atmosphere. But this also applies to any other decision in old age. Quality of life always depends on the context and the people around. Schopenhauer said that illusions often trap us more than the circumstances themselves. The main mistake is not choosing a nursing home, but insisting on an ideal that no longer matches reality. What truly matters is that each person evaluates their conditions and makes a decision that allows them to live with dignity, safety, and above all, without regrets. Time passes, children grow, and parents age. For many years, many parents dedicate their lives to raising, educating, and protecting their children, believing that one day this effort will be rewarded. The dream is that, having reached old age, they can count on the gratitude and care of those for whom they did so much. But reality does not always match this expectation. Many elderly people feel forgotten, ignored, and even unfairly wronged by their children. The time that was once devoted to them now seems insignificant. Visits become rare, conversations rushed. The feeling of loneliness grows, as does resentment. Nevertheless, Schopenhauer warned that relationships between parents and children are a biological contract, not a bond of eternal debt. Children do not choose when to be born, and as adults, they inevitably lead their own lives, just as their parents once did. The idea that children must repay all the care they received is an expectation built by parents, not a universal rule of life. The problem is not in the love of children, but in the illusion that gratitude will be expressed constantly and unconditionally. Expecting recognition and attention can be the root of great disappointments. Time transforms relationships. When children are young, parents are the center of their world. But as they grow, new priorities emerge: careers, relationships, children, personal challenges. The attention that was once focused on parents now disperses. This does not mean love is absent, but the rhythm of modern life and new responsibilities distance children from parents, even if unintentionally. For elderly people, this distance can feel like abandonment. For children, it is simply the natural continuation of life. Schopenhauer said that human suffering is born from expectation. Those who expect too much from others are always disappointed. And perhaps the greatest illusion of parents is believing that children will always be ready to offer the same level of care and attention they received in childhood. The cycle of life is not based on repayment, but on passing forward. Just as parents once moved away from their own parents to build their lives, now children do the same. The mistake is not that children become distant, but in the belief that they should act otherwise. One woman devoted her entire life to her children. She worked, cared, and gave up her own dreams so they could live better. She never complained about the sacrifices because she believed that in the future they would be there for her, repaying all that love. When old age came, she expected attention, constant visits, perhaps even an invitation to live with one of them. But what she found was silence. Her children loved her, but they were too busy. Calls were quick, visits rare. When they came, they brought haste and obligations. She tried to talk, to share stories, but felt that no one was truly listening. One day, she told one of her children that she missed the times when they were young, when they spent entire days together. Her son, unaware of the weight of his words, replied with a smile, "Mom, life goes on, doesn't it? Now I have to take care of my own family." At that moment, she realized something she had never understood. No one had abandoned her. She had simply expected from her children what they could not give. Schopenhauer said, "Most human suffering arises from expectation. Those who learn not to expect suffer less." It was hard to accept, but she realized that the gratitude she so awaited would not come as she had imagined, and that perhaps it was time to learn to live for herself. The main lesson that old age can teach is that no one owes anything. Children do not stop loving their parents, but their love is different from the love parents feel for them. While parents see their children as their greatest achievement, children need to move forward, creating their own stories. Those who enter old age expecting recognition and gratitude may end up drowning in resentment and loneliness. Schopenhauer said that wisdom lies in accepting life as it is, not as we would like it to be. Old age should not be a period of complaints about gratitude that never comes, but rather a moment of liberation. Let go of expectations of what others should do, and learn to live one's own life with greater ease and fewer demands. Old age comes to everyone, but not everyone knows how to accept it. Some perceive it as a period of decline, a time of losses and limitations. Others try to resist, denying its arrival as if fighting time were a solution. But there are those who find new meaning in old age, an opportunity to live with greater wisdom and fewer expectations. Schopenhauer said that the secret to a peaceful old age lies in accepting reality as it is, without illusions. Suffering, as a rule, does not come from age itself, but from the struggle against what cannot be changed. Many elderly people live in anxiety because they expect something from others: attention, recognition, care. However, happiness does not lie in waiting for children, family, or society. It lies in what we can do for ourselves. Old age can bring loneliness, but being surrounded by people does not always mean true companionship. Many relationships are superficial, sustained more by conventions than genuine affection. There are those who live surrounded by family, yet still feel deeply lonely. For some, living with children will be a path of comfort and closeness. For others, solitude will be easier than forced interaction. The important thing is not to follow an ideal model, but to find a balance between what is desired and what is possible. Schopenhauer warns us of the danger of emotional dependence. The more someone relies on others to find meaning in life, the more vulnerable they become to rejection and disappointment. Therefore, the essence of old age is not the company of others, but the dignity of remaining master of oneself. Accepting old age also means freeing oneself from guilt for living for oneself. Many elderly people go through this stage trying to please their children, fearing becoming a burden, suppressing their own desires. But what is the point of spending an entire life devoted to others only to reach old age and continue being bound by that duty? Schopenhauer argued that a person finds true peace when they learn to live with themselves. If we cannot change others, we can change our perspective on life. And old age can be a period of freedom. Freedom to say no to what makes no sense, to avoid places where you are not wanted, to choose your own companions, and to respect your own rhythms. After all, age does not deprive one of the right to want to be happy. On the contrary, it should make that desire even stronger. Old age should not be a time of waiting. Waiting for children to come, for someone to call, for attention to arrive time does not stop, and expecting recognition or companionship can be the fastest path to resentment. Schopenhauer teaches us that peace comes from letting go, from abandoning expectations that others must do something, and focusing on what can be done for oneself. Each person must find their own path in old age. Some will choose to live with their children, others will seek independence, and others may find solace in solitude. None of these options is wrong if it is a conscious choice rather than an imposed life. The key is to preserve dignity, to continue living with autonomy, not allowing the weight of the past or disappointed expectations to define the present. Because, in the end, old age is not the end of life. It is just another chapter, and it is up to each person to decide how they want to write it. Old age is a topic surrounded by doubts, fears, and expectations. For some, it is a time of solitude and introspection. For others, it is a moment of closeness with family, an opportunity to enjoy the bonds built over a lifetime. But in the end, each person has their own way of experiencing this stage. The central question remains, what is the best way to age? To live surrounded by people, even if the companionship is not always what we would like, or to preserve independence, even if it means facing loneliness. At times, this choice does not have a single answer. The experience of old age is shaped by our choices, but also by what is beyond our control. We can decide where to live, whom to interact with, how to spend our time, but we cannot control what others feel or force someone to give us more attention than they can or want to offer. Therefore, Schopenhauer teaches us that happiness should not depend on the presence of others, but on the ability to find meaning in one's own existence. Each person sees old age differently. Do you prefer to live surrounded by people, even if interaction has its difficulties? Or do you believe that independence is the safest path to preserving dignity? Share your opinion in the comments. Your perspective may help others reflect on this important choice. And to receive more stories and reflections like this, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. This way, you won't miss any new content. Take care of yourself. See you soon.